What is up, guys? Frosty Aussie 0232 here today for another Frosty Features. Today we are talking about Tigra. Tigra. And this actually might be the last of our new Avengers that we're talking about, so that's super exciting. So, what this is, if you haven't been here before, this is a comic book background on the tunes that you use in Marvel Strike Force. So, let's get started. According to Scopely, first introduced as the Cat in 1972 original comic by the same name, Greer Nelson began her superhero career with her physical and mental potential unlocked by experimental procedures and a gadget-heavy catsuit. After suffering a life-threatening injury during a selfless act of heroism, the mystically evolved cat people saved her by transforming her into the legendary half-human, half-cat warrior, Tigra, that we know today. So, we rate this at the end of the feature, so that's what Scopely had to say as far as who Greer Nelson was. So, let's dive in. Everybody comes here for the voices, right? Name, Greer Nelson. First appearance, as said in the According to Scopely, The Cat, 1972, number 1. Yes, she's been around for a minute. Her first appearance did not include her being Tigra. We'll talk about that in a second. Powers/abilities. Okay, so she is superhuman in every way. So superhuman reflexes, strength, speed, senses, things like that. Her actual, outside of that, like base superhuman abilities is she has her claws and fangs. In canon, can rip through different types of metal, including steel and things like that, which is really helpful. She is also a low-powered empath, so she can detect people's uneasy feelings, etc. And she's mainly on picking them up. She can't affect them or anything, but she can detect feelings in a room, which comes up more often than you would think. Aliases. The Cat, Were-Tiger, and Were-Woman. For after she first became the cat person, she was known as Tigra the Were-Woman, right? Because of who she starred alongside, and we will talk about that in a second. Affiliations, Secret Avengers, Avengers, and S.H.I.E.L.D. She is one of the only people in Marvel Strike Force's new Avengers team that actually is not involved with the new Avengers, but she's involved with many versions of the Avengers, including the Mighty Avengers and West Coast Avengers. Very notably the West Coast Avengers, which a lot of the new Avengers are affiliated with anyway. Background, she's from Chicago, Illinois, born and raised, stayed there for quite a long time, right? Who died? Because you can't be a superhero or a supervillain without somebody dying. In this case, it's Willie Nelson, or Bill Nelson, or William Nelson, her husband. So, originally, Greer went to college for biology, and she meets a policeman, Willie, good man, and she falls deeply in love with him, and by the time she's a sophomore, he has some pretty old school views on how things should be run. So he is the police officer, and he finds that she's pretty handy around the house, and she's, very, ready to fight and things like that, as far as being protective, but he wanted to be the protector, he wanted to be the man, to the point where he wouldn't let her drive her own car, kind of situation. And she was actually pretty cool with it, and she was just going with it because she was so deeply in love with him. So she was a biology major and drops out as a sophomore so that she can get married to this policeman and become a housewife, and that's totally submissive, whatever. And once again, she was cool with it until one time they're leaving a theater at night, and they come upon a live robbery. And in the live robbery, Bill pulls out a gun to stop the robbery and, intervene, but then the robber's assistant, friend, what have you, comes out of the store, adjacent store, and shoots Bill dead, and he dies in Greer's arms. And due to the fact that she was a housewife, she couldn't afford her bills and things like that. She had to find a new job, and she ends up working with her old biology professor, Dr. Tumalo, as a lab assistant. and things happen from there, right? So, a couple of interesting facts we want to throw out. Giant-sized creatures #1 in 1974, 2 years after Greer Nelson is introduced into the main Marvel canon, we find that she is further mutated into this tiger-like appearance that we're used to seeing her as now. This is the first time we see her, and she stars alongside Werewolf by Night, which is super cool. So the first time we ever see her in this form is when the first time we actually even see Werewolf by Night in the comics as well. So it's a really cool balance. Two really Tigra is maybe a little less so, but two pretty iconic characters starting off in the same, starting off in a new form in the same comic. Yes. The Woman Magnet. So, something I find really funny about Tigra, not funny, but I just don't feel like it was super effective, was Tigra was made and meant, so her story revolves heavily around being a woman in, the superhero world. So her intent, they made her for the intent to bring women to comics, to read more comics, which seems like this was pretty unsuccessful, and this is a pretty covered version of Tigra. For those of you who've seen pictures of her, she's usually pretty much in loincloth bikini type situation. So this is about as covered as she gets. I just think it's really funny that their move was, hey, we want to bring all these women to reading comics. Scantily clad cat girl, that'll do it. So that's just an interesting thing. She was supposed to bring in all the ladies, but I don't think that's what happened, and it might have been due to a little bit of artistry, but I'll leave that for you to decide. So, relationships. Gregson and Janet Grant are her parents. So her maiden name is Grant, so her name was Greer Grant when we first meet her, until she meets, marries Billy. William Nelson is her husband, her deceased husband, so she also has a few lovers throughout the comic book series since he's dead. William Grant Nelson is her son, which is super crazy, but ultimately, so on here I put Hank Pym ex-lover. I don't usually go too in-depth on the relationship stuff, but let's just go into this real quick for the heck of it. William Grant Nelson is her son. She thought she was dating Hank Pym for a long... And she ends up actually dating Hank Pym for a little bit, which, first off, I've never been able to do an Ant-Man feature as far as Hank Pym's concerned, so I'm just throwing it out there. Hank Pym's kind of a POS husband, real domineering, kind of abusive type. So that, in line with William Nelson's weird, I need to be strong, blah, 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 blah. I find it interesting that one of her main love interests in canon is Hank Pym. So she thinks she's dating Hank Pym, and, they're doing things that people do when they're dating, and they're adults and whatever, and it's fine. But then turns out secret invasion's going on, and guess what? That Hank Pym was a Skrull the whole time. And after the Skrull, they find out, and he actually isn't even a Skrull, he's a clone of a Skrull, right? And within that clone, they embedded Hank Pym's DNA. So he is a Skrull that has Hank Pym's exact DNA that is a clone. Thank you, comic books. And so anyway, after they kill that Skrull, we find out Tigra is pregnant. So, she's pregnant, and she's like, yeah, I'm gonna keep it, even though it's like this Skrull baby thing. And she ends up having the baby, and it's a little tiger guy, little cute little tiger guy. And she's like, hey, Hank Pym, is he a threat? Is he an alien? What's up? And Hank did this is real Hank Pym, does a, DNA sampling and does some tests, and he's like, he's actually fully human, with a little bit of cat people in him, but no Skrull, and biologically he's technically my son. So she's like, yeah, if I ever die, you gotta raise him. And he's like, I had literally nothing to do with this, but I guess that checks. He is technically biologically my son, so that's a thing. Anyway, so interesting, fun sidebar as far as Tigra's concerned. She's got a little son. He's adorable. Here we are. Moving on. Notable events. The cat to cat person. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about the origins of Tigra and Greer Nelson. So, at first, she's working as a lab assistant to Dr. Tumalo, and the benefactor to Dr. Tumalo's experiments picks his own test subject. So, the experiments being that women are mistreated in society, so Dr. Tumalo is trying to essentially make super soldier women, in short. But what it is it is a machine for women to achieve their peak potential, and she needed funding, so she got a benefactor, and the benefactor is like, hey, you take this person, his name was Donald Bane. Yeah, there we go. Donald Bane. And he's like, hey, you take this person, Shirley Bryant. She's totally cool. Nothing sketchy going on here. And what I need you to do is she's going to be your test subject. No questions asked. And Dr. Tumalo is like, well, that kind of sucks. Hey, Greer, do you want to be a backup test subject? Because all you're going to get is like benefit out of this. And I don't feel like Brian's intentions are cool. And Greer's like, sweet. So there's two experiments going on at the same time. Shirley Bryant and Greer Nelson after hours to the side, right? So come to find out, Shirley Bryant is a spy. Who knew? And so she was stealing the layout. She was stealing all of the all the machinery and things like that with her enhanced. So this enhancement also kind of gives the women a form of an eidetic memory, so she can remember everything that she ever sees, things like that. So she uses that to copy the lab exactly in Donald Bane's house, so that he can recreate the machines. And after it is proven that this test is successful, his aim is to kill Dr. Tumalo and Greer Nelson and destroy their lab. So at this point, Donald Bane's like, I'm doing really good. I've got this thing going, and I made these collars. It's going to further enhance you, Shirley Bryant. Shirley Bryant's like, sweet, put that sucker on me. And he puts a collar on and the suit, which is it's a cat suit, more yellow than Catwoman from DC-esque, but puts the collar on, and turns out it wasn't that at all. It was a mind control thing, so he could control all of her actions. And he's like, hey, climb up to the top of this building and swing across and break into this lab. And she's like, okay, and she tries to jump and swing across, but due to her will kind of conflicting with the actual being told what to do, she fails the jump and falls to her death. Good stuff. But with that, Greer has found out that all this is going on. Dr. Tumalo suspected it from the beginning, and she runs in and she steals one of those cat suits because it actually helps. There's a bioengineer thing, and she corners Dr. Tumalo. Oh, and in the process, when Shirley Bryant dies, she is able to make the lab explode, and we think that Tumalo's dead, but Greer ends up being able to get her out of the rubble. And then she's like, I'm gonna go get Donald Bane. And she goes to his house and she's like, yo, bro, I got these really sharp claws from this suit that you made, and I'm superhuman by all means, so what are you gonna do about it? And he's like, I actually have this deep phobia of people touching me, so I'm just gonna trigger warning, suicide, trigger warning, I'm just gonna shoot myself in the head. So he kills himself, and she's sort of justified or whatever, and she goes around with this suit as the cat for 2 years. So then we see her come around in Giant-Sized Creatures #1, where she's starring alongside the Werewolf by Night, and we find out that Dr. Tumalo this whole time actually wasn't a human at all, but she's a descendant of the cat people, who are these cat people who live within this like demonic realm. And so she Hydra is after her to try, because they think that she has like the original, so the cat people engineered the Black Plague, and Hydra's trying to get a hold of that, so they're trying to track down Dr. Tumalo. And Greer, dressed up as the cat, is trying to protect Tumalo, and in the process, she gets hit by a ray of alpha radiation, and she's dying. So Tumalo, this is when we find out Tumalo is a cat person, takes Greer to the cat people, and she's like, oh my god, we've got to save her, cat people, help us. And they're like, magic, 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 magic. And she becomes part cat person, and she gets a cat's head amulet, which allows her to change from her human form back to her tiger form. But typically in the comics, she mainly stays as the cat form, so there's that. But she did slash does have the ability to change back and forth. So now we see Werewolf by Night and Tigra as Tigra, fighting Hydra throughout this. So that's how she becomes the cat version of herself. Moving on, we're going to talk about Master Pandemonium and Tigra. So, with Pandemonium, as Tigra moves on being Tigra, and she is slowly kind of coming more into herself, she actually develops dual personalities when she joins the West Coast Avengers, and there's a situation where she almost kills Hawkeye in a training situation, because she has essentially a very animalistic, lustful, brutal version of herself, and then her more or less human form. And the idea is that there's a cat soul and a human soul that are conflicting. So she's starting to go a little bit bonkers, as you were, and so she is debating on quitting. But eventually, she with the West Coast Avengers travel to the Land Within, which is this place that the cat people live, which these cat people are the parent tribe of the tribe that Dr. Tumalo is from. And so she gets there, and they're like, hey, you need to kill Master Pandemonium. So for those of you who don't know who Pandemonium is, he is a human that has made a deal with Mephisto, and so Mephisto replaces a bunch of his limbs with demonic replicas. So he's like this crazy, and he's got a pentagram in his chest. And Mephisto's got him on this sort of goose chase. He's like, hey, I split your soul into 6 parts, so if you want to become whole again, you have to go find all of these different parts, or all of these different parts of your soul, and put them back together in your chest, and that'll make you whole. But turns out it's actually Mephisto's soul, and he's just using him to run. He's sending him on a fetch quest for him. But anyway, spoiler alert. Pandemonium has found out that the cat people have one of these soul shards, so he's trying to get him. So they have tasked Tigra to kill Pandemonium, but the Avengers have a rule that you're not allowed to kill anybody, right? So she's like, I can't do that. So they fight him off or whatever, but she's like, I can't kill him, I'm sorry. And then they leave. Eventually they go back to the Land Within, and we find Pandemonium is back looking for this soul shard. At the behest of Mephisto. And so we also learned that due to the fact that the Land Within is in this demonic realm, as I said before, the longer the cat people are there, the more demonic they become. So they become a little bit kind of crazy. And so when West Coast Avengers show up to kind of help with the Pandemonium situation, tracking down demons and Mephisto due to some other things going on, Tigra shows up, and they're like, hey, you're that person that didn't kill Pandemonium. And she's like, yep, that's me. And they're like, you don't get a cat soul anymore. Not a cat anymore. And take out her superpowers. Also, we're going to talk about power scale here in a little bit, but Tigra has this really fun thing where she goes through the biological experiments with Dr. Tumalo, and she becomes superhuman. And then when she becomes Tigra, she becomes even more, there's a power-up. And then in a second, we're going to talk about another power-up. But ultimately, the more Tiger features that Tigra has, the more powerful she is. So at the end of this story, she gains a tail. And so, up to date, in the comics, if you see Tigra with a tail, this is the strongest version of Tigra there is, right? So far. So anyway, she puts on the cat suit, so she's back to being the cat, and she fights her way back to the Land Within and gets back to the cat people, and she's like, I'm gonna challenge your champion, because all tribes in Marvel have a champion, and if I beat them, I get the cat soul back. And they're like, all right, great. So she fights their champion, Bal-Katar, and she kicks the crap out of her, and they put the cat soul back. She wins her cat soul back, and they put it back into her. She's now the champion of the cat people, so she gets a small upgrade. Now we see Tigra with a tail. And she wins, and she becomes her ultimate strong self, and is able to defeat and chase off Pandemonium once again, but still not killing him. But she actually, and it's kind of funny, like moving forward with West Coast Adventure and stuff, she goes back and forth on how how much she considered killing him, which if we watch Frosty Features Mockingbird, we talk about how she ran into some stuff with that, and there's a big thing between her and Tigra about how Tigra can kind of understand how Mockingbird feels. It's pretty cool. So check out Frosty Features Mockingbird. There it is. Alright, moving forward. Power level. Marvel Strike Force doesn't care about power level, but here on Frosty Features, we do. Now, the way that this works is that if you are a multiversal threat, you are a threat to all of reality, not just your reality, but all the realities in the multiverse. You can topple the tower that is the multiverse on your own. Universal means you are a threat to the universe, the reality that you live in. Maybe you could hop over to the next one and end that one. Cosmic means you are a threat on the small end to a planetary scale. You can level things like planetary bodies and maybe solar systems and galaxies with enough time and effort. Nuclear means you have power equal to that of a nuclear bomb, leveling things like small cities and up to a planet with enough anger or rage. Super Soldier means that you are beyond the peak of all human ability. You are at a power level in which that you can take out things like brick walls up to a city block with enough effort. City means that you are a human trained to the absolute peak of human ability, right? So in Marvel, we see a lot of our secret agents here, a lot of our mercenaries, things like that. Excuse me. And then there's Greg. In Marvel Strike Force, Greg is the undead Asgardian that Hela spawns, and he, for the most part, can be a bit of a wiener. So in this situation, due to undead Asgardian physiology, and just because I like to think of it this way, we're equating Greg to a regular human being level. That means if I had a pencil bag full of 2 erasers and a bunch of sharpened pencils and enough anger, I theoretically, as a regular human being, could take on Greg. So, in the case of Tigra, what we have here is somebody who has more or less gone through super soldier treatment, and she is firmly planted in the super soldier level. Now, she is exceptional within that level, right? So there's parts where she very much is compared to Black Panther. She's compared to people like Captain America. So she is not a baseline super soldier. She's definitely towards the top tier of super soldier, but she's far enough away from nuclear that there's not really a debate there. But as far as just straight up super soldier level people, she's definitely going to be probably in the top 10. She's very strong for being more or less just superhuman. But yes, so she is firmly planted mid to high level in that super soldier level. So that is Tigra. And moving on, according to Scopely, as per the usual now is the information is not necessarily incorrect, but it's very generalized. There's a complete kind of disregard for there's a complete disregard for Tumalo. The fact that she was superhuman before being turned into Tigra, and also it completely glazes over her origin entirely. So like it doesn't talk about William Nelson or anything like that. So I find it a little odd. So at the end of the day, it's not wrong. Nice try. They did okay. It really feels like it's lacking some pertinent information, but it's really not that bad. But with that is Frosty Features Tigra. I hope that you all had a good time with it. Please like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel a whole bunch. And as a reminder, I stream at the link above on Sundays starting at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where we do Frosty Features live. I hope that you all had a great time. Please let me know your favorite Tigra moments in the comments, or if I got anything wrong. I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. Most importantly, y'all, stay cool.